In September 1988, a new train service between Zagreb and Belgrade, the Anton Gustav Matoš, came into effect, and the journey time between the two capitals was 4 hours and 2 minutes. Time passes, we're now 36 years later, in 2024, the year of sustainable travel. Let's see how long it takes these days to go from Zagreb to Belgrade.
It was a beautiful morning in Zagreb, and we got to the station and the train was there and it left on time, pulling out quite gently to start our journey.
So we left Zagreb on time at 6:20 this morning. The first part of this leg is on the way to Vinkovci, the oldest continuously inhabited town in Europe, and also it was, in Yugoslav times, it was the biggest rail centre in the whole of the country. We've just passed through Slavonski Brod. Croatian Railways are upgrading their infrastructure and their rolling stock particularly, and now up to 50% of their trains are new. We didn't get a new train today, but the one we're on is very, very pleasant. It's got plugs and everything else to be connected to, and we've got tables to sit on and having a nice chat. And the track is upgraded in certain places much more than others, obviously, but for the first time in my life, just as we went between Novska and Okučani, we actually managed to get up to 160 kilometers an hour, which is the fastest I've ever been on a Croatian train, and I never thought I'd see it. So some way to go for sure, but you can see that slowly some things are coming together, and perhaps one day we'll have the fully upgraded track, and to be able to go at 160 kilometers an hour all the way would be absolutely magnificent. And now we're coming into Struževojna, where the rail track divided into two, but more importantly, this is known as the place where murder on the Orient Express took place. And looking around the carriage here, we have our suspects. Which one of these do you think did it? And here we are, arrived in Vinkovci at 10:48 on time. Nice ride. There's no catering on Croatian Railways, but we have 2 hours before the next stop at Tovarnik. And so we came to the White Boar, an authentic English pub just outside of Vinkovci, for a fantastic barbecue lunch. Time for the next leg of the journey, and it's a train to Tovarnik, which is quite close to the Serbian border. So there was a 2-hour break between arriving in Vinkovci and now leaving, but we have 3 modern trains here on the station, and this is the one we're going to get on. And so now we've got off at Tovarnik because about a half-hour very modern train, and that's where our relationship with Croatian Railways ends for today. Since 2019 there hasn't been a single train going across the border for Croatian Railways, not even local trains. And now if you want to go, you have to go from Vinkovci to Tovarnik, and then you have to walk about 8.5 kilometers across the border to Shid, and then pick up a connecting train into Belgrade. And this is the route that in 2024, this era of sustainable travel, if you're traveling by train from Zagreb to Belgrade, this is the route you have to take. Now we just walked out of the village of Tovarnik and coming up to the Croatian border. Got some nice echo portaloos there, and the rain has just started. This is going to be fun. So here we are in Shid, the final connection to Belgrade. The walk across the border was quite interesting. It took about 2 kilometers to the border from the Croatian side through a fairly narrow road and then through the village itself. And then fortunately we saw a bus driver as we went through customs and asked him if he knew about any taxis into Shid. And he gave us a lift on his bus, very nice man, straight into Shid bus stations, and that was just opposite the train station. So here we are, this is the train to Belgrade. It should be leaving at 5:20, which is exactly 11 hours after we left Zagreb this morning, and is due to arrive at 18:53. After 1.5 hours, very pleasant train ride from Shid, we ended up in Belgrade Central at 18:53, so all the trains on the day were absolutely on time. Some time's passed now, I've been looking back at the day. There are a number of conclusions one can draw. The reasons people think that there is no train between Belgrade and Zagreb these days are numerous. Some people think it's because the tracks on the Serbian side are not good enough. That was certainly dispelled by that train from Shid down to Belgrade. We got up to 160 kilometers at one point. Some people say
it's because of the migrant crisis. That also is a little bit strange because the cargo between Serbia and Croatia functions absolutely superbly, so there's no problem with that. And if I was a migrant, I think I'd have more chance on a cargo train than on a passenger train with people checking. Some people say it's political. We'll come back to that in a second. Some people say it's because either side don't want to have their rolling stock too far into the other country. And again, that's a non-starter because Shid is 5 kilometres from the border with Croatia, and there's a perfectly functioning train going. So you just take the train into Shid, change trains, off you go to Belgrade, the train comes back to Croatia, end of story. It's even more bizarre because probably the most bizarre part of this story is there is one passenger train that does go all the way through Croatia, all the way through Serbia, but doesn't stop anywhere. And this is a seasonal train that goes from Villach in Austria down to Turkey, and it takes cars and passengers all the way for the Turkish people wanting to go home, not wanting to drive. And this goes along the route, doesn't stop in Croatia, and so this proves that actually for passenger services this route works perfectly well. And so the only conclusion that can be drawn is that this is a political decision. You know, this could start again tomorrow. You could have a train from Zagreb to Vinkovci continuing to Tovarnik, and then from Tovarnik just the 5 kilometres to Shid, and then from Shid down to Belgrade. I see absolutely no reason why that couldn't happen if there was the political will. A few other takeaways from this trip. There's been huge engagement with this stuff I've been posting on Facebook. We've had over 500,000 impressions, for example, on this one where we showed how quickly the train was going, and there is enormous scepticism about Croatian railways from the Croatian public, and I totally understand why. It's been massively underfunded in the last 30 years, and some of the train infrastructure really is terrible. But there is such scepticism about everything that if you show something positive, it's immediately dismissed as AI, fake, not in Croatia, and so on. And there's a long way to go. But the infrastructure is slowly being improved, certainly in parts, and now we do have sections where it does go at 160 kilometres an hour. Along the same route, it's down to 40 and to 60, and that's going to take a lot of time and investment to fix. But it is fixable. Rail travel is essential for a successful economy and for tourism. The number of people that, on Interrail tickets that, want to come to Croatia and want to come to this region, and they're just totally put off because there's no connections. It's really sad. And the other thing I would say about the train was it was a really pleasant experience in terms of comfort, which really surprised all of us. There were 4 of us on the trip, and all the trains were modern. They were air conditioned, they were spacious and clean. Although the trip took 12 hours, including all the walking, it was a really fun day out, and I'm really glad I had the experience and I learned a lot. But it really made me think again about how much better train travel is than going on the bus, which is how I came back to Zagreb afterwards. There are some really bad sections of train, and people are talking about how I should go from Varaždin to Zagreb. But also, slowly, there are some parts of the train network in Croatia which are actually starting to look relatively modern, and especially in and around Zagreb. I was on a train from Dugo Selo to Zagreb recently. We did a video about that. And to me, that reliability and that comfort of going into Zagreb from Dugo Selo, for example, makes it an extremely attractive place to live. I mean, you can live in places like Dubrava, get the tram in, and it will take you longer to get into the centre than it will if you come from Dugo Selo by train, and then you have the chance to live out in nature in a small town just outside. I totally understand why people are so supremely negative about Croatian railways, and I've certainly had some interesting moments with them as well. But like most things in Croatia, I also like to see the shoots of positivity and the shoots of change, and definitely there are some very positive things to take away from this. And if we can have a little push to push the politicians to see what they can do, then we could have this route back in no time. And I think it would be a good thing for tourism and for connections between the two countries. Having a good rail network and good connections is good for business, it's good for tourism, and it's generally good for society.